yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. It's been over 5 years of us doing the show, and still there remains no other Flyers podcast other than Snow the Goalie. Interesting. Anyway, thank you for welcoming us into your homes, into your ears, through your eyes. If you're watching over on YouTube, of course, youtube.com/@SnowTheGoalie. You can follow the Only Flyers podcast on YouTube, but of course, on your favorite podcast feed as well. Now, I'm Russ Joy. You can find me on Twitter if you so choose, @JoyOnBroad. But really, the people you're here for are Bundy, who you can find over on the right side there, @CTherien6, and Anthony SanFilippo, who I'm hoping is going to be committed to the Flyers, but we're not sure because your team, your town, your Philadelphia Phillies have advanced to the NLDS, but we're going to treat him like a Flyers guy for today. And that, of course, you can find him on Twitter, @AntSanPhilly. Gents, how are we doing today? The Flyers preseason is over. The regular season is, well, it's mere days away, and there's a lot of excitement in the Delaware Valley for the Orange and Black. How are we doing?
Who are you throwing it to? Usually you say, I'm going to start with you, Bundy, or let's go to Ant first.
I decided that today I would be chaos.
You just kind of left it out there for us.
Yeah, well, you know what, since you started talking, how are you feeling? Are you excited for the return of the Orange?
I'm annoyed this morning, Russ. You know why I'm annoyed? Wow. I found out that you've never seen the Goonies.
So you're going to hijack the show. I wanted to get into Flyers talk. We
actually have Flyers talk. So we always do this, but we get right into the Flyers. A lot of Flyer stuff to talk about. I can't wait to talk about. I wore an orange hat today because of that, right? It's not the right orange.
It looks like a do-rag. If I'm being honest, it looks like a do-rag.
It's
now,
not. It's actually
Scott's
not.
Tots, Prison Mike. Whoa! You said you never tell people what's on the front of the hat.
Not on the baseball ones, I don't. But Tennessee Volunteers hat. So
turn it around. It's like blinding.
Yeah.
Now, if you take the hat off, what's going to be more blinding, your hat or the reflection off your scalp? Anyway, let's go over to Bundy. Bundy, how are you feeling?
You didn't even answer the thing about Goonies.
Nope, you wasted your time talking about the Goonies. Bundy, how are you?
I'm doing good, Short Round. How are you? I mean, sorry, Short Round was from Temple of Doom. But he was also in the Goonies, wasn't he, Ed?
Yes, he was.
Right.
And he also won an Academy Award last year for Everything Everywhere All at Once, right?
I got through 20 minutes of that. I'm going to work on the next 20 minutes next year.
Yeah.
And eventually I should have the movie done in 6 years.
There you go.
But yes, he was K-Hugh Kwan.
Yes,
Short Round.
Correct.
And he was in the Goonies. Yes. So, Russ, go watch that movie later on today. It's an American classic. And who else is in it? Legendary football player John Matuszek, who plays the role of that big ogre. Remember,
Sloth.
Anthony? Yeah, the sloth. Yeah.
Sloth. Chunk.
Chunk. You want to eat all that stuff?
And can you do that one more time?
Chunk.
Sloth. Love.
Love. Chunk.
If you don't think that's going on Shorts and TikTok,
see, we talk about a lot more than just hockey on Snow the Goalie.
That's right. Oh, yo, hold on. We got to address this. I forget the guy's name. And this person, I guess, has listened to the show for a long time or has watched since we've gone to YouTube. But every episode now, he goes into the comments on Facebook and on YouTube and says, skip forward to the 30 whatever minute mark if you're looking for the hockey talk. The rest is bullshit. Well, I'll have you know, fella, that we're here for hockey talk today because the preseason's over. And like I said at the start of the show, the regular season, it starts next Thursday for the Flyers. It obviously starts a few days earlier across the league. Now, Anthony blindsided Bundy and I before we hit record today to say that, like, hey guys, why don't we do the Stanley Cup predictions? Why don't we tell people where we think things are gonna land? And Bundy and I looked at him like, hey jackass, we all have a group chat. You could have brought this up, before like 5 minutes before we went and hit record. So we're not doing that today. Next week we'll probably do some predictions. And by the way, speaking of next week, I want to get this out of the way, okay? Because Tweedledee and Tweedlebundy over there, at the end of last week's episode, they started kind of, getting people hyped up for an announcement incoming. And I said, guys, we really shouldn't do that yet. And they kept going. They took my hype job and they made it their job last week. And I can tell you, and Ant can say this as well, the thing that we've been alluding to is, I don't know, at the 3-yard line, Ant, like this thing needs to happen in the next 6 days or I'm going to scream. but I think we're just about there.
So my favorite text of the week was Russ sent me a text a few days ago that said, this week's episode's title is going to be Snow the Goalie, lawyers. No, but here's what we can say about it. We are doing a pretty major interview on Monday.
Okay.
We're doing a pretty major interview on Monday for the next episode. So it kind of got pushed just a few days. We're doing it Monday. It's already set in stone time and everything. We're pre-recording it. So we will be pre-recording it at 12:30. Just so you guys know, we already know this. It's 12:30 Monday. Pre-recording this interview. And then I believe Wednesday is the day that we'll be able to put it out. Could be Thursday, but I think Wednesday.
Depends on lawyers, baby.
Yeah,
It depends on lawyers.
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 Gotta love them, huh?
Lawyers.
That's
it.
Love
You don't have to say anything else.
We love the attorneys. We love the law. We love the law. So these people have been great, and they go back and forth, and they like figure things out, and they say a bunch of words that none of us understand. But what we do know is that we have gone back and forth with an entity for a few months now, on and off. I'm very confident that this thing is going to get done, and when it does, all of you out there are going to be really excited. I do also have to tell you that Ant and I have not talked about this recently, but we have had this idea to potentially do something for maybe away games on the YouTube channel. We have not finalized that yet. There are a few different things that we're working on. One of those things is, I think I mentioned last week, like there's a potential that we're going to do a newsletter, like a daily newsletter to keep people up to date on things. I'm going to probably start writing about the Flyers on snowthegoalie.com. Ant's going to continue to write things on crossingbroad.com. Hell, I mean, I'm still employed by the company that bought Crossing Broad. But I feel like at some point we need to start to provide some content on our own site. So I'll probably move to that. Ant will do Crossing Broad. And we'll probably get this newsletter thing up and running in the next week or so. We have that going on. And then we have this idea out there about doing something the day after road games, kind of like a morning after recap that we'd probably do on YouTube. We've thought about making that something that's for like members at like a very low fee. I don't know. We're very like back and forth on what we're going to do there. We've decided that if we're ever going to do any kind of like a membership thing, I know like some people do Patreon and some people do like YouTube channel memberships. We always said that if we're going to do something like that, we want there to be a lot of value to it. We still are trying to figure out what that's going to look like. I don't want to take anybody's money unless we feel like there's an actual value. But if there are people who pay $5 or $10 to get Bundy to drop a Bundy bomb on an episode, I'm thinking that there's probably a chance that some people are fine putting a couple bucks up if they're getting additional content. But in the meantime, I'm just letting people know. Like, we do have a bunch of different things that we're thinking about. I can promise you.
Can I do one last teaser? Little tease?
Yeah.
Without saying it? A former thing that used to be affiliated with Snow the Goalie will be back.
I mean, we kind of alluded to it already last week, but yeah, okay.
Did we say it? I don't know. Did we?
Did we?
I don't think we really alluded to it. We said something special's coming, we think.
Yeah.
And I still think something special's coming.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if we said it last week, guys, but I know for me, I'm excited to be doing pregame radio to open up the Flyers again. I mean, I was a head radio guy before. I did the actual live broadcast. But you know what? I'm actually great with teeing up the games next week. That's what I will be doing from 6:30 to 7 on 97.5, and then 93.3 was only 15 minutes. So, but I'm back over there at least on the concourse. I know that much. That's kind of been announced, but the best part is I will be on the concourse doing Flyers pregame radio.
Yeah. Bundy, I do have a question for you, and this is really important. So you're taking pregame. Are you doing anything during intermissions or postgame?
I am not that I am aware of at this point. So, no, it's good. Is I get like I told like Jonesy, like, there's a lot of different things that we were trying to, figure out over the summer, and we came down to this. But what I wanted more than anything was to actually be down on the concourse with the people, because I think it's really what getting those fans back, getting them riled up again, setting up a good pregame. But I'm not doing anything intermission wise on that or a post game at all. There's no post game on NBC. That ship's
wow.
Thank God it did.
Bundy, that's very interesting that you should say that you're not currently booked for intermissions or post-game. Sure would be a shame if you found yourself doing something.
You know
All
what?
right, now that we've done enough freaking hints, I think enough people are going to understand what's going on, or at least part of what's going on.
You know what, Russ? We don't want to create competition for anybody. And you get,
oh, no.
No, not at all.
No.
You don't want to do that.
Not us.
No, wouldn't want to do that.
Becomes,
not us.
Nobody would want anything interesting said in intermission or post-game. But
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Anyhow.
You don't want that. I mean, can you imagine if... No, I almost said something I can't say.
That's all right.
Can you... Never mind. We'll talk about it next week. And if it's not next week, I will let people know. If you've been listening to the show and for the last few weeks you've been like, tell us what the fuck you guys are working on. Just tell us. Okay, just tell us. I have spent 2 months ready to explode. Okay? Or 3 months ready to just...
I can't tell you how accurate this is.
To just lose my mind.
So accurate.
Because as we've talked about, we've had multiple offers of things that have come across our desk in the past 3 months. And I just want things to get the T's crossed and the I's dotted. I don't like having things up in the air. So if you hate listening to the teases, believe me, I would love to tell you what's going on. And since we're pre-recording it, I'm just going to say it or I'm going to explode. We are going... I'm just kidding. Just kidding. We'll talk about it next week. But to Ant's point, there is something cool going on. We've alluded to something that's been going on. It's going to be really cool. Very excited about it. And I can tell you the person who's probably the most excited is me, because I'm going to be able to tell Corn Pop on Twitter that I will be at opening night. And I will tell you right now, I'll be at opening night. Ant will be at opening night, and Bundy will be at opening night. As a matter of fact, we'll probably be there early enough that if people want to go find Bundy on the concourse, they can. And I'm sure if they want to go find us, as long as we're not downstairs eating, we will probably be around. If people want to, high five, shake hands, and, get excited about the Flyer season. We have a lot of cool stuff that we're excited about. I can't tell you how excited I am to just get this thing done. There is one person who's listening to this right now who texted me a few days ago and said, if you guys tease this thing again, I don't know how anyone's going to survive. It's somebody who works for that entity. So I'm just saying, we're all very excited. Just get the lawyers, they have to do their thing, and then we can be happy. All right, anyway, let's go. So to the person who says, hey, skip forward to the 12-minute and 30-second mark, it's now your time. The Philadelphia Flyers wrapped up their preseason on Thursday night with a 5-2 win over the New York Islanders. Now, let's not call this the start of a Stanley Cup contending season, a team that's going to shatter expectations. But it was a good performance, and we saw a number of players who I think people have been looking for positive signs from who had a positive effort in this game. Now, the roster has been trimmed down to 26 players. There are some cuts that are going to have to be made. Now, as of last night, just to give people an idea, and I'm sure that you've already watched the game, or if you haven't, you're going to go back and watch it on DVR. The top line last night was Farabee, Couturier, Foerster. Foerster is one of those guys who's been in a competition, mostly with Bobby Brink, for one of those final forward spots. The second line had Tippett, Frost, and Atkinson. They were buzzing last night. Third line had Lawton, Cates, and Konechny. Also looked good. Fourth line had Delorier, Paling, and Hathaway. The defensemen last night, the top pair was York and Ristolainen. Stahl and Sanheim were your second pair, the latter of which had a very bad turnover that led to a goal, but we'll get there. And then the third pair was Sealer and Walker. Not listed there, Andrae, somebody who people have been excited about. Not listed there, Zamula, somebody who people have been excited about. And then, of course, in net, you had Carter Hart, backed up by Sam Ersson, who, by the way, was named as the backup goalie going into this season by head coach John Tortorella. Now, as we mentioned, 26 players, you've got to trim this roster. A lot of thoughts going through people's heads of what's going to happen, who are going to be the final cuts. One that obviously makes the most sense to clear space would be a Felix Sandstrom. That gets you down to 25 players. But then we get into this very strange predicament. And I want to start with the forwards, guys. Foerster and Bobby Brink both have had good moments. They've had good moments in camp. They've had good moments in games. Fans, I think, for the most part, hope to see both on the team. But if you look at that lineup, they are, at least one is seemingly being blocked. So, Ann, let me start with you. Is there a possibility that both Brink and Foerster make the roster? And if not, who do you see ultimately getting that final spot?
I'm gonna answer your question, but I'm gonna answer it by circling back to the beginning a little bit. The lineup you saw last night, and it's important to note it, is a lineup I think almost to a man, minus one player difference, that you're going to see on opening night.
I agree.
I think so. In that regard, I think Tyson Foerster makes this team, whether he deserved to or not, over Brink, because Brink, I believe, had a better camp and better preseason games. Foerster's the guy. Rasmus Ristolainen was supposed to be in the lineup last night, had a very minor injury. They kept him out purely for precautionary purposes. He's going to play opening night. The person who replaced him in the lineup was Emil Andrae. Mm-hmm. That should be a telling sign for you as to who they view as the next defenseman. It's Andrae and not Yegor Zamula, who we talked about last week. And I put out there that I said, I don't think he's on the roster in 2 weeks, right? When the season starts. What has changed slightly, and it's only slightly, is that they were not overly impressed with Andrae to the point that they want him playing regular minutes at the NHL level yet. And what I was originally told was he was going to make this team. He was going to be the seventh defenseman, well, the seventh guy, and probably a veteran. The veterans would rotate as who's in the press box, but Andrae would play. It was kind of like the same situation Cam York faced at the beginning of last season, right? So they kind of thought York would make the team out of camp. He didn't. He got sent down to the A, played a little bit in the A, worked his way back up, and now, and then he became a regular and he was there the rest of the season. I think Emil Andrae is going to have the same situation play out. As such, they can use that opportunity to keep Zamula at least temporarily as the seventh defenseman. So he'll get to play a little bit, but I've been told that they're not particularly thrilled with where he's at. They're happy that he's further along than maybe they thought coming back off of the injury from last year, but that he's not like, oh yeah, this guy's going to go in there and he's an NHL caliber defenseman that's going to be there every night, blah, 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 blah. They don't see that yet with him. So it gives them time. They don't have to give up the asset, because if they put him on waivers, he's going to get claimed. So they don't have to give up the asset. And then if there's another injury to somebody else, by the time Andrae comes back, if somebody's hurt, then okay, well, I guess we can keep Zamula up there, whatever. Okay. They actually like a couple other kids who are going to be down with the Phantoms. Phantoms are going to have a pretty solid defensive group for an AHL team. I mean, they like Ronnie Attard, they like Ginning. So those two, I think, also could surpass Zamula at some point this season too. And at that point, I think maybe then Zamula ends up on the waiver wire. So to start the season, he's probably going to stay only because Andrae's not ready to go. Now, Foerster and Brink, again, I think that's a matter of Foerster is the better prospect overall, but Brink certainly outplayed him. And I don't think that there's a way to keep both unless, and this is the only unless you're willing to not play one of those fourth line guys who they love their fourth line. And I don't disagree with them. I think for a fourth line, it's a very good fourth line with Delorier, Paling, and Hathaway. But unless you're moving one of those guys to healthy scratch status and dropping Scott Lawton down to the fourth line to leave a spot for Bobby Brink to be in the top 9, then I think Bobby Brink starts with the Phantoms. So I think all told that's what it is. Sandstrom will be waived. I think he's, that's already been announced, like you said. So I think those are your 3 moves. So Andrae, Brink, and Sandstrom down to the Phantoms.
And yeah, and again, just to add to this a little bit, so there's always an excitement, I think, in camp when there's a young guys that take a leap forward, and then there's I don't want to say a concern, but like a wonder almost about the guys that maybe haven't been able to do it yet. So Zamula would come to mind as one of those guys that they've kind of been, I think, hoping for, but it just hasn't happened. As Anthony says, 23. Unless you're like you've come out of college and you played it somewhere else for a while. Sorry, guys, I don't know what's going on with this. I got the bad. Someone's dialing in on my FaceTime, and I don't know why. It's not mine. Anyway, what's interesting is those that how you view guys going forward. And so what I'll say is about Foerster and Brink is if they keep progressing, the Flyers will probably move somebody else to make room for those guys if they've made strides. Where they're able to complement each other both offensively and defensively. Like they'll move guys. There's guys that have been here a long time now. They've been part of the same regime. So if there's a step forward to take, it might be moving some salary. It might be moving someone else aside. But the destiny of those players, it's a lot harder to create your own destiny now because the contracts are so layered and everybody kind of knows coming in what is what. And I think for this one issue, those players' development will just dictate what the future looks like. Defense is going to be in tough. I mean, listen, this is not – when you look at these guys, now you have Ristolainen with Cam York. York is still a developing entity to me. He's got a lot to prove defensively in his own zone. The guy that I actually think could solidify things possibly this year is Sanheim in a lot of ways. I remember talking to somebody at the rink the other day about it. Like, all he has to do now is just go play. Like he's been reamed, steamed, and dry cleaned in terms of what you go through as a player internally. Called him, said, we want to move you. And then the player that they tried to trade you for wouldn't come here. So you go back to the drawing board. So from his standpoint, I've been there a little bit, maybe not like getting moved when you get a brand new deal, but I've been kicked. I've felt kicked like a lot of guys do. And the only thing you can do is just play hockey, go out and do those things. And if anybody watches that special, it's on Netflix. I watched a little bit the other night with David Beckham's story a little bit. He got tossed out of a game and the whole world was against him. And all he said was, all I could control was what I do on the field. And as hard as that was, and I think there's a few guys that need to do that this year on this team. Just go play hockey. Do the right things, be responsible defensively, continue being a good teammate if that's who you've been your whole life. But also don't be afraid to take a step forward. This is a year where there's a lot of change that's going to happen. There's a lot of versions of this team that people are going to identify with over the year, including the coaches and management. They may see a team on a Monday that they like that's completely different 2 Mondays from now, because that's what happens with a team like this. You just don't know what you're going to get because it's patchworked. And that's why Danny had enough balls to finally call it a rebuild. Call it what it is, and we'll treat it as such. I will treat it with the respect it didn't. You know what's different, guys? This is the same team essentially as last year. Actually, it's less on paper, right? You take away some of the guys, Provorov and Hayes. But at the same time, there's not a big lining and a layer of bullshit around this where everyone's telling us it might be okay. No, maybe it'll be okay. But as Danny said a couple weeks ago, that'll be up to the players and how hard they work and how things come along. The one thing that will not be tolerated is getting gaslit again, and that we've not been gaslit. And that's why this team deserves an opportunity to step out of what they've been in. That's a shit pile, and to step into the sun a little bit, and to try to move forward. And I think that's what's important. But this is going to be an evaluation the entire year, and especially the young guys are going to have a real microscope on them, because if we're going to be moving forward, you need to know what you have and who's worthy of keeping.
There's no bullshit here in the Danny Briere, as I apparently said on that Flyers commercial. Looking for my residuals check from the Flyers. Just, you know how to get in touch with me.
Yeah. Two things for you, Bundy. One of the questions that people ask is, well, if the Flyers like both Andrae and Zamula, why not keep both? Why can't you have 8 defensemen?
Yeah. So this is one that goes back a long, long way. My first year in the league, guys, and I look back at it and I thank God it was a blessing. We only had 6 defensemen my first year, and we kept the 7th defenseman down. We had me and Dykhouse were rookies. We had Kevin Haller, Desjardins got traded, and then Yuskevich and Rob Zettler, maybe my first year. But we only had 6D. We didn't even have a 7-8. a seventh and eighth defenseman. A seventh and eighth defenseman do nothing but get in the way. A seventh defenseman's great because it gives everyone that rotation. So you put 4 on one side, 3 on the other, and then he flips. But you got to keep the seventh guy fresh as well. If you have the seventh and eighth defenseman, they just take up time in practice and they take away your repetitions. That's the way I like it. And also they just get in the way. They just get in the way, and I just think it's almost like a starting quarterback getting reps during the week or for your game. I think the defensemen really, really need to make sure that those outlet passes are crisp. You don't want to be waiting a minute and a half between drills if it was a long drill to get up and go again. So from that standpoint, I just don't like having the extra bodies around. Anthony, that's a good question, but certainly one that can be a distraction as well. Not one that's set up like that for that reason, but it can be a distraction just having that many bodies around.
And the other one that comes up all the time, Bundy, is, well, if we're in a rebuild, why don't we just let all the kids play? So why is it? Now, and Russ used to be this way, and he's kind of, he's grown up a little bit. He understands it a little bit more now. But just for those who still believe that, because you can't just play Brink and Foerster and let one of the veteran guys sit. Can you give a kind of an explanation as to why you can't develop until you're at a certain level to play in the NHL? Like, what? That's why the AHL exists, right?
Well, I think I hope I remember them, but I think I just put 3 things in my head as you asked the question. Number 1, contracts, right? So you got guys that are just automatically by default have had contracts, and whether they sign them somewhere else and they've been acquired, that's part of it. You also have to meet the floor, right, Anthony? Mm-hmm. Like the salary floor. So you're not going to get 20 kids that are going to equate to whatever the floor is, 45 million, maybe it's something like that, if I'm not mistaken, in and around there. So that's one issue. The second issue you don't want to do is take your prospects, your young prospects, and send them out to the wolves. And like your sheep, send them out to the wolves, because what happens is if you do that, I mean, there's guys now, when you look at different leagues, they talk about exposing young guys too quickly. That happens. You could rush a guy's development, and then it counter works against that player. They've seen too much. It comes on too quick, and they're over. And then you just get knocked out of the water. It's too much on those people. The third thing, Anthony, it was a really good one, and I'll probably remember it in a second, but it really, and a lot of it too is, again, that's why they have the American League, right? Like that's another reason for developing them. You don't want to also hinder your guys, your young guys over time. And that to me is the biggest one. If you have a good player, like York is kind of that tweener, right? Like if you took a bunch of Cam Yorks that go out and get them last year, that's like tossing a guy to the wolves in a lot of ways, especially defensemen, because it's hard to play. It's a really tough position to play in the NHL. But from a standpoint of where we're at, those are 2 things that jump right out at me immediately.
And a young player, Bundy, will let you know when he's ready to be in the NHL, right? A player lets you know. Yeah, you watch him play in the AHL, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's ready.
Yeah, but also if you bring a guy up too, like for example, there's no doubt about it. It's a lot easier playing left or right wing in that league than it is playing defense in a top 4. I mean, listen, it's not even close. A winger, you can be a little bit, if you're scoring a few goals and you check, you can do a really good job and be a player in that league. But trust me, as a defenseman, there's a lot of responsibility, closing the gap, quickness to the puck in the D zone, proper coverage responsibilities, making switches, being able to communicate with your center and the other defenseman. There's a lot of stuff going on. To be a winger, get on the boards, get your pass, chip it out of the zone, and get up the ice and score. There's not a lot of thinking involved in being a winger. Those are facts. Center and the 2 defensemen are your meat and potatoes on the ice. And the wingers hopefully can chip in some goals and snipe from their recording spots on the ice.
So, and you want to say that I grew up, or I've grown up, or I'm working on growing up. I wish I could just grow. That would be great. So I could just be a little bit taller. When I look at the team, right, this team is vastly different than some of the other teams where I've said, like, play the kids. And in a lot of cases, it was because I just didn't agree with the incompetent president of hockey ops at the time, who told us year in and year out that this was a potential Stanley Cup contending team and that they were going to surprise people and that they were going to be better than all the pundits thought because he was an idiot. When you look at this team, this is where I come back to the idea of, all right, I like the fact that Morgan Frost, at least last night, is playing 2C, and he has 2 capable goal scorers on his wings. And now, if you're going to try to get a better idea of what you have in Morgan Frost, you're giving him the best chance to be successful. I look at what they're doing with Noah Cates, that they have Konechny down on the third line with Lawton. They have Cates flanked by Lawton and Konechny, 2 guys who not only can put the puck in the back of the net, but in the case of Lawton, somebody who's going to play a 200-foot game and also understands how to play center and understands the responsibilities for everybody on the ice. So I think they're putting him in a good position. That third line, this comes back to like the philosophical thing. And a lot of people of a certain mindset say that the fourth line is an antiquated notion that your muckers and grinders and your physical players shouldn't be on a fourth line. It's a waste. You should put the kids on the fourth line and try to have another skilled line. Until the rest of the league does it, you're putting yourself in a really bad potential position. And when you look at that fourth line, all right, you take Delorier out. All right, fine. Or you take Hathaway out. I mean, I guess fine. But if that's to keep Bobby Brink around, do we think that playing Bobby Brink on the fourth line is going to be advantageous for his career? Do you think that it's going to put him in positions to be the most successful or to know what you have with him? I'd argue no. It's the same general principle for why I wasn't a fan of the idea of Morgan Frost a couple of years ago being a 4C, where like most of Flyers Twitter would lose their minds about how like, hey, this kid has to get minutes. Play him on the fourth line. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. And again, you could try to be the trailblazing team that rolls out a young fourth line with skill, but if you're going to do that, then your top 3 lines had better be damn good. Like you better be an elite team. And by the way, in that elite team, somebody in that top 9 had better be a bruiser. You better have a guy like a Tom Wilson who's going to like actually get in fights and defend the younger players. This team doesn't have that right now. So like, I don't think that it's a good fit for the idea of play the kids. Now, would I like to see Bobby Brink stay up, practice with this team, and get minutes? Yes. Do I think that there's like a realistic place to put him right now? I don't. Unless you were going to like move Lawton down to the fourth line. You were going to, I guess, move maybe like Hathaway up or something, and then you were going to like move out Delorier. Like I don't know how you make it work. I just don't see it. So I think it's fine. I think it's a little bit disappointing because, as you said, Brink has outplayed Foerster in a lot of ways. But I think when you ultimately go into the season and you say, we're putting Cates in a really good position, we're putting Tippett in a good position, we're putting Frost in a good position, you take those 3, you chalk that up as a win. Actually 4 with Foerster. You check that off. Now, could we get to a position where a Cam Atkinson is moved this season? We've talked about this a few times. If he can prove that he can be healthy, if he scores enough goals, could he be a trade deadline target? It's possible. And then at that point, if that's where you need to bring up Bobby Brink, then by all means, have at it. Have fun. But until then, people are going to want to bend themselves into a pretzel. It just doesn't make sense. At least now it doesn't. So I think the roster's fine. I don't have a problem. But let's talk about one other thing here, guys. But before we do, let's take a moment to let people know about shop.snowthegoalie.com. Of course, your place to go if you want all the merch in the land. Now, when we say all the merch in the land, I mean all the merch in the land. We've got shirts, we have hoodies, we have glasses, not like ocular glasses, but like drinkware. We've got camelbacks, there's mugs, there are thermoses. We got the works. Everything there. Mishkov Mania, you can get Bundy's face with the Bundy Butte shirt. If you go over to twitter.com, go over to Twitter X, and you go on the Snow the Goalie page, you'll even see we have a link right there to the Snow the Goalie shirt. You can get the logo. Very simple, affordable price. Enjoy yourself. And we have to shout out a couple of people who have recently made purchases on the store, and we're very excited about it. Now, and I don't know if you have it pulled up. I don't know if you can pull it up. Of the nice person who had the picture with the mug. It was their birthday this past week. But there was somebody who ordered a mug. It showed up. They were very excited about having this mug. I will tell you that there was somebody else who made a purchase a couple days ago, and I emailed them really quick. There was an issue with their order, and then this person said, hey, actually, I was trying to send my brother a mug in Florida, but it wouldn't let me do it. So I ended up ordering one for him and one for myself. So just send it to my house and then I'll handle sending it to Florida. I don't know why that happened, but anyway, this person ended up buying 2 mugs, 2 for the price of 2. So good job to that person. Thank you, obviously, for purchasing things from the Snow the Goalie
Were
store.
you asking me to find out who it was? That
Yes.
Yeah, it's at Tragic Apple.
At Tragic Apple. Fantastic.
Yes.
It was birthday.
At Tragic Apple sent that photo.
That's fantastic. So anyway,
the best line in there in that tweet too is she says, "Best birthday present ever." But what's with the Flyers podcast on the mug? It's the only Flyers podcast.
She gets it.
Anyway, happy birthday to me. Thanks, guys.
That's right. I will tell you, I find it even more confounding, more than ever, that there's still only one Flyers podcast. And yet here we are. I guess we'll just hold out hope that someday someone will join us and we can have banter with another Flyers podcast. But until then, I guess we can't. All right. Let's dive into some stuff here, guys. But Bundy, every time I say that, it looks like he's going to keel over. Please don't.
Well, because he's, you know why? You know why, Russ? Because he's kind of starting to be like, all right, Russ, you're droning on again. Here you go again. All right. Let's dive into some new stuff. All right. Yes. Let me pop back up and get back excited to be part of the show again. Yes. Okay.
Good stuff, Russ.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So we have a general idea of how this roster is going to shake out. The preseason's over. The Flyers season starts next week. Now, I did solicit questions, comments, and concerns from people on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And we did have some people send over their questions, comments, and concerns, and also their thoughts. So I want to get to a few of those before we jump into the next topic. So really quick, we had people who offered their thoughts on how this was going to play out, how the roster was going to play out. I want to get to those really quick.
That's called people.
No, I have it. He's so Lee Carasso, Lee C., who always leaves a weekly Apple Podcast review, said Coots and Atkinson will make the Flyers stronger this year. Their additions could add to their overall point totals slightly. Will they actually be competitive this season or not? I want to get back to that because there's this growing idea that the Flyers might do something. Ian Moran said the Flyers over-under is 73 points. They had 75 points last year. Forward depth is way better. Provorov was overrated. Over is a lock. So let's start there, okay? There is this notion out there that perhaps your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers are going to be better than expected. All right, so the over-under 73, they had 75 points last year. Of course, that was a team that Chuck Fletcher told everybody was in a retool, not a rebuild. So, gents, let me throw it to you. Will the Flyers go over or under 73 points this year?
They'll go over. They'll go over that. They'll go over. But if that's around the number, I do think they go over that number. But here's the deal. What was the playoff team? What was the 8th seed last year? I mean, that's 20 points out of a playoff spot, is it not?
Pretty much. I mean, probably about 18 points out, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that's what we're looking at. I mean, so if they say somebody said the over under 73 points. I don't know if that's official, if someone in Vegas did that, but I think they go over that. Now, did I say they're going to go 15 points over that? No, but they're going to go over 73 points.
I think it's going to be right around there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really do. I mean, I think it's a really good job by Vegas to set the line at that number.
Yeah.
I think that they're a team that puts up points somewhere in this mid 70s, low to mid 70s.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I mean.
Where they're going to end up. And that probably has them bottom of the division, bottom 5, 6 in the league. I mean, that's really kind of what I think it's going to be. Do I think they're going to be the worst team in hockey? No. Do I think that they're going to be competing for a playoff spot? No. But I also think that they're going to get off to an okay start, similar to last year. Like in the beginning, I kind of think that they could surprise a few teams, sneak up on a few teams. But ultimately, what this is going to come down to, and I think Bundy agrees with this, is that the defensive core just is not good enough. It's just not. I mean, it's not ready for prime time in a couple of places. And the veteran guys that are here are great guys. They're going to be nice locker room people, and they're going to be teaching younger players how to be pros, but they can't be counted on to shut down some of the offenses that they're going to face. And I think the Flyers offense will be better, but that it has to be better. It was so so bad last year, right? It can't be worse. So, bringing Couturier and Atkinson back, of course, that's going to add, some offense. But does anyone think that those two guys are suddenly going to turn a 73-point or 75-point team into a 90-point team? Players don't make 1 and 2 players do not make that much of a difference unless they're superstars, right? Unless they're, Connor McDavid types, right? You're not making that kind of difference. So no, I mean, maybe they go over 73 and they get to 75, 76. I think that's kind of about where they'll finish, but I wouldn't say it's a lock to go over 73, nor would I say that that's considered exciting. I think it's just a matter of enjoy the process of watching young players develop and see what you have.
Yeah.
And then, because that's where this is really the first legit evaluation year. Like last year, it was a matter of who do we want to be part of this rebuild and who do we not want to be part of this rebuild. This year, it's like, okay, now that we've identified that we want these guys to be part of the rebuild, let's see who's here, who we want to think about being here long term. And that's what this season's going to be about. Some of the younger players will develop a little bit, and hopefully, I mean, that's the plan. And the ones that don't, okay, maybe we move on from those. And that's what this season's going to be about. And let's not kid anybody or kid, whatever. The Flyers are going to finish somewhere in that low to mid 70s in points.
Yeah, and the one thing if you talk to like Jonesy, and I mean I thought they did last year, like under Torts, I thought that they worked really hard. That's one thing they did. I thought a lot. Like they really put an effort forth, and that's one thing you're hearing again a little bit is, well, you know what, we don't know, but we're going to work hard. We're going to really, really put an effort on the ice. And that's good. That's what you want to see because that's what the roots of the team has been about. It's always been about effort, hard work. But again, it'll be an evaluation period again through the entire year because, there's young guys here that are going to get a chance to play, but they should not think in the process that their jobs are safe for the long term. This is still a moving target in a lot of ways for management to try to turn it around, and it's going to take time. It's going to take some time before we see something through the draft and free agency over years. But, again, there's going to be an opportunity to see this team really, really work hard nightly because there's somebody else right behind those younger guys. And if they're not going to work, they're just going to switch one for the other. And because that's what they have to do. And that's really in a rebuild. You have the luxury of doing that. You're going to see a lot of different bodies in the lineup this year for the Flyers, especially if there's injuries and if you want to continue evaluation. So I expect to see a lot of that, but I do expect to see another foot forward this year in terms of where players are at. If you're developing, continue developing. Don't just be satisfied with it. Keep moving forward. Keep taking a bigger bite of the apple because it's only with everybody else being a full participant are you going to have a change and an overall change with this team. And that's what they really need to continue selling and doing.
So, all right, we think that, you guys think that they're going to go over 73 points. I have very bad news for everyone. They're not only going to go over 73 points, they're going to have 88. They're going to end up right on the bubble.
You're out of your mind.
They're going to have 88 points. You just watch. They are going to surprise people. And it's the worst possible thing that could happen this year, but they will finish right around the bubble. They might sneak in. They might not. If they make it into the playoffs, God help whoever they play in the first round. Because as we've seen with the Philadelphia Phillies, there's nothing quite like home field. I can't keep this up. They're not going to get 88 points now. They're not. I have to say, if things go according to plan, right? I think all agree Cam Atkinson, very positive guy in the locker room. Somebody that you want to support. You want to see have a bounce back year after losing last year, right? I would love to see him get moved to a team at the deadline. We think that Mark Stahl is going to get moved at the deadline. We think that there's a possibility, as Ant has, reported and reiterated multiple times, that there are multiple teams interested in potentially securing the services of Carter Hart as a netminder. If Carter Hart gets moved and Sam Ersson takes over, I think Sam Ersson's a great potential young goalie that maybe you think fits your timeline and you want to build around. I support it. I get it. But if Carter Hart's gone, and if you are at some point to move Cam Atkinson, you are at some point to move Mark Stahl, this team ain't going much over 73. If those 3 guys are moved, I think you don't even crack 70 points. If 2 of the 3 remain, then okay, like let's say the cap is like 78 points.
So you can bottom out, Russ. You can. I mean, you saw teams do it last year, right? I mean, you saw teams plummet towards the bottom of the standings to try and get that first overall pick.
Yeah, but nobody tanks in hockey. You know, Gary Bettman would tell you nobody tanks in hockey.
Come on.
No, hockey teams have too much integrity. That's those scumbag NBA teams. They're the ones who tank. The NHL would never do such a thing. No, the NHL is like totally based in, you know, logic and reason and good standards. You know, they don't do anything wrong. Go ahead. You're right.
So yes, you can absolutely bottom out.
We talked about this, how to do it last year.
Yeah.
You just put it, it's not about like taking guys, we talked about it. And it's just making the roster as least feasible as possible. Guys are still going to put an effort out, but you just load it with less talent. Mm-hmm. That's what you do. That's the game plan. You can't do it like the 1919 Chicago White Sox. There's none of that goes on anymore. That's not that's not a way to do things.
So just so people know, and yeah, I'm a guy who always kind of looks at schedules, right, and say, okay, what are we looking at, right? So you look at right after the trade deadline. Okay, this is the Flyers schedule immediately after the trade deadline. St. Louis, at Florida, at Tampa. Then an easier one, they come home to play San Jose. Home against Toronto, at Boston, home against Toronto, at Carolina, home against Boston, home against Florida, at the Rangers. You're going to lose them all. I mean, that's going to be one of those. That could be one of those 10-game losing streaks right in there. Like, I mean, that's brutal. That's right after the trade deadline. So if they're out of it and they move a couple pieces, whatever, and they're trying to get that record down towards the bottom, schedule works in their favor in March. It really, really does. So, I mean, you can get to that point. That's why I say you can even have a mediocre start. And I can envision the Flyers being a 500 points percentage team at Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving, right? First 20 games. I could see them being right around 500. But come the end of the season, be at the bottom of the standings, nowhere close to 500. Right, just the way it works out, the way this whole thing shifts around. I look at those schedules and say it's just kind of how it's going to be, man. Like they're not going to be in contention, and so right after that trade deadline, it's just going to be a free fall, and that's okay. It's okay.
And you're being negative.
You know what, guys? I mean,
I'm not being negative.
What do people say about Snow the Goalie? And what did they say for the first few years? You guys are too negative. And
we're too negative.
Being so negative.
Then we became too positive.
Then we somehow became sellouts. And then I guess now we're somewhere in the middle. The thing
they had their chance last year. If they wanted to be really bad last year, they could have been really fucking bad last year and gotten a chance at Bedard. But we actually told you guys, and we told everybody, they'll be 5 games or 7 games better than what they need to be to get the pick because the coach knows what he's doing. They needed to get a Third in here last year that had no clue what he was doing and then take the team and make them as bad as the Blackhawks. Listen, people can be pissed off at the Blackhawks because they ended up winning the pick. They put themselves in that spot. Mm-hmm. They put themselves in that spot. And they actually still had a few players that you could actually watch last year that you'd be like, wow, that guy's used to be pretty good. And he's here in Chicago now. But they did it how you're supposed to do it. The Flyers, I'm telling you, had a window, a beautiful window to do that, but it just got that was not in the cards. We weren't going to sell bad all the way.
See, the problem was they had a very competent coach. They had a competent coach.
Damn it, you missed it.
Well, I missed what?
You didn't do the bomb.
Oh, I actually thought we were going to get through an entire episode with that.
I said it 3 times already, and you don't even know it yet.
I mean, that's like you're...
All right, there you go.
It does make me laugh every week.
Now, I will say, there was somebody who, it was Broad Street Bullies, at Bullies Broad in the Twitter community, set the over-under at 2 minutes and 13 seconds. So, at Bullies Broad, I'm very sorry, but you were very, very off on your Bundy bomb.
Yeah, this is a lot. I mean, again, I don't think about it just kind of when it flows out, but I mean, we're at 48 minutes, 49. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is, last year, and this is why this year is so different. It's fundamentally different. Last year, the Flyers had a coach who was going to raise their floor and a fucking Muppet as their president of hockey ops who gaslit the fans and continued to tell people that the team was better than they thought it was.
It was the GM too, Russ. It was the GM.
I mean,
too.
it was the same. I was the same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but like they had this guy saying that the team was going to be better than everyone else thought. We were all living in bizarro world, but in the mind of he who shall not be named, the team was like, you know, a legitimate playoff contender. Okay. Fletcher Mort. This year, you still have that coach. He's still going to raise the floor. You know, if you had hired a total schlub last year, you would have had a better shot at Bedard, and then you obviously would have put yourself in position to be in position for a top pick this year. All right, fine. Your floor is still higher, and now you add in a competent goal scorer in Cam Atkinson. You add in a former Selke winner in Sean Couturier, albeit coming off of multiple significant injuries. Fine. You add all those things in and you say, all right, maybe the floor is a little bit higher on this team. But the thing that you do have that you can be excited about if you're a fan is there is a competent GM and a competent president of hockey ops, who are not the same person, who are in lockstep on what this team needs to do to not be a good team now, but to be a good team long term. Now, Ann, I don't want to throw this back to baseball, but I'm sure that you saw the comments that came out of Seattle about was it the Mariners GM who said this thing about, you know, you need to win. You need to be a team who can win 54% of your games over an extended period of time. And those are the teams who ultimately go on to win the World Series. And then a bunch of people like lost their minds. And he said that like the fans should kind of like thank them for taking that philosophy. If we apply that to hockey, you don't need to be a lights out team to contend for a Stanley Cup. Look at what the Bruins did last year, setting all kinds of records. They were fantastic. They got their doors blown off, right? This team is not anywhere near that level. And you're Mr. Get into the playoffs and see what happens.
Yeah.
This team, though, thankfully, has a brain trust that says we don't want to just be lucky. We don't want to just be a bubble team. We do want to build a foundation that this team could be a legitimately good team for an extended period of time and not have these people, these fans who pay the good hard-earned money to come out and like watch a potential bubble team for a decade. They don't want to do that. We've seen that year in and year out, and they're trying to do it differently. So you know what? Hats off to them.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Wow.
What he said in baseball, while it riled the fans, I think is more accurate in the sense that the way that they have their playoffs set up, it does favor wild card teams over teams who are really good and run away and win the division, right? Mm-hmm. So therefore you don't have to spend bazillions of dollars, and you know it just get in the baseball. In baseball is far greater chance of going to a World Series than there is in hockey. Yes, upsets happen in hockey all the time, and that's why I say just get in, because you never know what can happen. But I think, you know, Columbus beating Tampa a few years back, Florida beating Boston last year, while those things do happen, ultimately in the end, you're not winning a Stanley Cup if you're a mediocre team. Okay, you're just not. I mean, you can make a nice run. If you have a good team and maybe, you know, you could beat better teams. I mean, for sure it happens. Like the best team doesn't always win, but you still have to be a good team to win a Stanley Cup. Nobody's sneaking in. Like, I mean, you know, I think back, when was the last time you had a really bad team that made the playoffs and made a crazy run to the Stanley Cup final? Montreal did it, I guess, during the COVID year, but that was a weird setup, right? I mean, that was they put all the Canadian teams together, right? So that was a whole different thing. You have to go back in time to like when the freaking Minnesota North Stars, right, in the early 90s, were a 50-some point team and got in as like the fourth place team in their division, and then went on a crazy ass run. So like
LA did it right though.
No, they were the number 8 seed, but they were a pretty good team, right? I mean, even the Flyers, when they were the 7 seed and went in 2010 and lost in the final, they were still a good team. They just underachieved in the regular season. Yeah. I think you still have to have a good team to do it. You can't be bad and get into the playoffs.
Right.
So I think that's the difference between the two.
The issue I think that's come around now in sports, and just talking as a sportsman in general, with baseball and hockey particularly, I don't know about NBA. I know they play that little play-in thing, but what it definitely does is the team that is the wild card team has been clearly battling for an extended period of time to get to that, where the other team goes on cruise control. And then you have a team that's been fighting tooth and nail for 2 months to get there, like Florida. Now, Boston last year, I thought they made a lot of mistakes. I thought their coach went in the toilet on them. I thought there's a lot of players that did. And they had a 3-1 lead, and they gave that up. I mean, who thought Boston would lose 3 games in a row? I did actually think Florida would make a run last year. Hard to predict that they'd get through Boston, but that's what happened. And then, Florida's a team with all this mojo. They grew together as a group, where Boston already had it built in, but they lost their mojo and their magic. And that can happen easily. Baseball, it's the same thing. What happened last year was more prevalent. I remember how pissed off people were because the Phillies had advanced so quickly and were beating teams that had great regular seasons. Well, that's just too bad. And it might happen again this year, If Atlanta gets beat by the Phillies and Arizona goes and beats the Dodgers, I'll bet you one thing, they'll make changes if it happens again this year. They'll do something about it because they do want probably a prevalent team like that in. And it's a joke. It's the same thing with hockey, though. That's just the nature, I think, of competition and the nature of the way a team flows through the year. And it definitely, if you're a 1 seed and you got that 8 seed and you think it's going to be a walk, think again. It's absolutely not anymore.
Yeah. And yeah, the bottom team that got in back in the day, Bundy, when it was done by divisions and the 4th place team got in, usually you could get a mediocre team or, that gets in, or even not a less than mediocre team gets in just because the division isn't great.
Right.
But nowadays, the way that they have it worked out, the one good thing about, and I'm not a fan of the alternating, the wild card switches divisions and whatever. I'm not a fan of that, but at least doing it via conference, that 8th seed still has to put up 90 some points to get in. Like, you aren't barely over 500 getting in anymore. You actually have to have a good season to get into the playoffs. And so if you're pulling an upset, like beating Boston last year, while it may be a surprise and Boston may have, shit the bed there and let Florida do it, Florida was a good team that got into the playoffs, right? I mean, they were a good team. So that's, I think, Russ, that's the one little difference. I see what you're saying, but that's why I say just get in the playoffs in the NHL, because you are a good team to be in that round of 16. You're not backdooring your way in with mediocrity. You're a good team.
So let's keep going. We have a few other questions, comments, and concerns that came in. BAP at Tiara1023 in the Twitter community asks, question for the podcast: what do you think the Flyers will try to focus and improve upon the most? Power play, penalty kill, or something else?
Probably 5-on-5 play, I guess, is what I would say. Team play on the ice. I mean, you're only going to have so much skill in the power play with the players you have. I do think that'll be improved, though. I think Morgan Frost will take a bigger bite of it this year. And I think that sometimes addition by subtraction might be the case. But I think the power play might be okay. I think that, Frost will be a better fit there, and a little bit more Cam York. We'd like to see how he develops in the power play, if he can really assert himself there. But for me, it's continued 5-on-5 play, taking care of the D zone, making a quick transition plays with speed through the neutral zone to push the other team's defense back. I think there's a lot of things you can do with this team this year in terms of working on what they have going on. And there's some players too you're probably going to have to really be patient with in a lot of ways too. Even some veterans, let them get their feet under them a little bit and coming out of the gate. But that's what I would be focused on, really, is make sure a lot of these guys have a very, very good understanding of how to play 5-on-5. Because if you do play good 5-on-5, you can give yourself a chance and keep the scores tight. And then maybe allow your special teams to take precedent. But that would be what I would focus on, guys. The biggest thing would be continued 5-on-5 play.
Yeah, and Bundy, I think it's fair to say at 5-on-5, I mean, that's foundational, right? I mean, that's what you have to have that first before you worry about special teams. Yeah,
100%. And, special teams are the bonus, right? You say you win and lose games on special teams. Well, that's true, but you really win and lose games at 5-on-5 because the penalties are dictated from your 5-on-5. And if you are a really good 5-on-5 team, you can flat out win hockey games, where you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. That takes a big hockey team to do that at 5-on-5. I always find more physically a team that can wear you down and grind you, kind of like Florida a little bit last year, the way they played towards the end of the year. And Vegas is certainly the prototypical 5-on-5 team. They got big defensemen, forwards that are willing to pay a price in the ozone. And ultimately, that wins Stanley Cups. That'll get you on a deep run at the end of the day.
We did have a couple of questions about predictions for the season for the Flyers of how many guys will go over 20 goals and 30 goals. I think we should save it for next week since we're going to do more of a predictions-based episode next week. We did have a bunch of people who said that they were bummed that the episode is not live today. Again, we'll be getting into that next week. I just want to let people know. We like doing the show live. We think that live is better.
We prefer it live.
We prefer being able to interact with people live. So this is hopefully, like one of the only exceptions to the rule in terms of like live versus pre-recorded, I guess. I think for the most part though, guys, that's where things are at. I don't see anything else that like stands out as a crazy thing. We did have a couple of
you're talking about just from the questions.
Yeah, okay. There's one about this came in from David Castleman over on the YouTube short who said, with the preseason coming to an end, do you expect the Flyers to make a trade? Could we see Sandstrom or Zamula moved as part of a deal, given that they're not waiver exempt?
So the one thing I'll say to that is, and I haven't heard anything specific, but this is just me reading some tea leaves. When Torts was asked about, guys competing for that final roster spot, and he said, we don't have to have anything set till Monday, and I don't want to say anything. I'm not going to tell you guys anything until after that. He says, I'll be forthright with you after we set the roster. He said, but I can't say anything beforehand. I wonder if that leaves the door open for something like that. I can't say that with any certainty. It's just that, when you're around this, when you do this job as long as I've done it, sometimes there are things that you can kind of pick up on that coaches or general managers say in media availabilities that make you go, what does that mean? And then you try to speculate and figure it out, ask some questions, whatever the case might be. I haven't been able to get anything specific on that, so I can't say with 100% certainty one way or the other, but I do wonder if that's a possibility still.
Interesting. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to? Oh, I do. There is one other thing that we wanted to get into on the show. It's an interesting thing that came out of Canada. I don't want to trigger the person who like went out of their way to email and DM complaints about Russ, let the Hockey Canada investigation go. Nobody gives a shit. It doesn't matter. There's no charges. Nothing's come out yet. Stop talking about it. Do you want people to be involved in it? Shut the fuck up. All right. There's another. Yeah, I know. God forbid you want justice for a victim of something.
Can you bomb yourself right now? Hit that little the Russ bomb. It's a joy bomb.
Here's one.
Talk about overcompensation.
Yeah, I know.
Jesus Christ! I thought it was going to. I thought
bigger, Bundy.
I thought it was going to be a firecracker.
Yeah.
Why do you get a fucking nuclear bomb and I got a little thing like that?
Bundy. All right. So, there was something that came out from Canada. It happened to come from Hockey Canada. It's not the big case that still is sitting out there unsolved. It had to do with, I guess, Bundy, you explain it because you have previously been affiliated with Hockey Canada and all that. There's an issue with what?
I just can't fucking believe we're talking about people have lost their collective fucking minds. All right. I'm going to say it now. The world is just gone mad. And we're here to let you know that too. Go ahead, Russ. Tee this up because I don't understand it. And I don't like talking about shit like this, but I have to.
This got sent over, and I was honestly confused. And I was like, all right, we can touch on this quick because it apparently has become a thing now. But Hockey Canada set out a minimum attire rule for dressing rooms for apparently minor league hockey, or minor hockey, for minor hockey. So this is like kids playing hockey. Now, if you've played a sport in your life, particularly a sport that's indoors, you get sweaty, you go in, you get changed, you go home. Now, if you're a little kid, you just you go to your parents or whoever took you to the game, you go home, you're kind of stinky, you sit in the car, everybody gets mad, you stink up the car.
We used to put towels down in the back.
You put towels down, or you put like the dog blanket or whatever in the back seat, and you move on with your day because you're a little kid. But when you're a sweaty, stinky high school kid, that's probably not a great idea. I had a friend in high school, still friends, but in high school, he used to put his soccer gear in the trunk of his SUV and like would just let it sit there in between practices. And he was a goalie, so he had his sweaty ass goalie gloves. He had the cleats. Sometimes there were, it got nasty in that car. Like it had to roll down the windows. Now, soccer's different. Soccer in Schuylkill County, very different. There wasn't a beautiful performance center. There certainly was not a locker room, a dressing room, a shower, anything for that. But in the case of like hockey, I'd even say for basketball, you're playing an indoor sport. You're going to probably reek if you're a
Russ,
pubescent human being.
Stopping you right there.
What?
Hockey is the stinkiest sport.
Oh, no, I know. I'm just pointing out.
It's not even close.
Indoor sport. Yeah, I'm just pointing out indoor sport. You go to the locker room, you go to the shower. For God's like, listen, if I had played hockey, right, let's be real. If I had played hockey and I had gotten disgusting and then sat in my parents' car, that wouldn't fly. Go get cleaned up. So there's this policy now with Hockey Canada that if you're a youth athlete
under 18,
and under 18, so that means
make sure
and I want to point out, if you're like in high school and you play hockey, this now prevents you from going into the locker room and then going into, I guess, I don't even know if this, I think this now applies to like communal shower or something access. You have to wear a base layer of clothing, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And like, you can't just like go about what you would normally do. So Bundy, you're the one who played hockey. So like if you were playing, say you're a senior in high school, you're 17, you're in your senior year, you're a disgusting mess. This now says you have to wear a base layer of clothing in and out of the locker room. And I guess presumably to wherever the shower is, you need to like figure your stuff out in an individual stall or something and then like not go through communal areas. I don't understand. I don't know who this was for, but they've now instituted this. So like, yeah, I don't know. I don't get it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't understand it because it's so I've coached hockey. Like my son was, 60. He would have been like 11 or 12 when he stopped. And I understand kids 11 to 12, like just get undressed, they put their sweats on after and they run out and they go play or whatever. But when you get to 14, 15, 16, high school years, I mean, eventually, they're just going to remove showers in the hockey rinks. That's what they're going to do because every single locker room that you go into, whether it's an old barn, has at least 3 or 4 showers in every single bathroom in the locker room. So I don't understand the point, guys. I'm not really sure who they're trying to cover for here. It's a sweaty sport. It's dirty. Guys go in the locker room and get changed. It's kind of insane, to be honest with you. And I haven't seen a lot of pushback the other way in terms of who they're preventing it for. What is the agenda? I don't get the agenda.
Here's another one that's weird to me, Bundy. So, and maybe I didn't read the entire story, so maybe they made mention of this in there, and I may have just missed it. So if I did, I apologize in advance. But if you're under 18, does this include the 16 and 17-year-olds who were playing in like the OHL, the Q, WHL?
Yeah,
I mean, they're under 18 in Canada.
You would certainly assume.
Okay, so now you're talking about guys who are getting paid because you get a stipend in those leagues, okay? And they're playing with older adults in the same locker room.
Technically legal adults, right? The 18-year-old. Yeah, right.
They're playing with 18, 19, and some 20-year-old. There's overage in those leagues. Yeah. But there could be 16 playing in there. So now all of a sudden, does everybody have to abide by this? Like
that's what I'm saying.
No, I mean,
because there's an under
the
18
way
in
they make it sound is that it's only for under 18. Now,
but what I'm saying is like, let's say you're 16 and I'm 19 and we're on the same team. Do I now have to abide by this same rule because you're 16?
Oh, because
dressing next to me.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Right? I mean, that's what I'm trying to understand. Like to me, it's ridiculous because now you're talking about people who are in major junior leagues that could be affected by this same concept. I don't know. It doesn't make and apparently no one asked for this. Right.
That's the thing that's the most interesting about
the
story. The story came out through Canadian press, so it was on Yahoo. It was on what was the one, Ant, that I said before we went
Toronto
live?
Globe and Mail. I read the Toronto Star story.
The prevailing wisdom here is that there was no community that asked for it, and there was a sociology professor quoted in the one, at least it's on Yahoo, that said like it doesn't appear that like the LGBTQA+ community asked for this. It doesn't appear that like they were saying something about like the Muslim athletes. I don't know if there's like a coalition or whatever that like it doesn't look like they were the ones asking for it. Was this just Hockey Canada?
Sounds like a whole lot of CYAs involved here, Russ.
You just kind of wonder if like did Hockey Canada just decide
off the rails? Is what they are. They're
in
off the
fairness,
rails.
Now let's play devil's advocate. Hockey Canada has had their fair share of legitimate issues: hazing, sexual assault, allegations, all kinds of things about hockey not being inclusive, etc. Is this just an example of an organization trying to get out ahead of things, way ahead of things, by putting into place a policy that's like, again, nobody seems to have really asked for with a large voice? Is this them, to whoever was that said it, is this just covering their ass ahead of time? But like, there is the point where there's like a law of diminishing returns. Now I get it. If you're listening right now and you're like, why the hell are these guys talking about this thing? Who cares? It's just, it's a strange policy to put into place. I will say, if this is for the protection of, say, like there's a 17-year-old who's playing on a team with 20-year-olds, I will say, I think it's fine. I think that the policy is fine in that if you're an underage player and you're sharing a locker room with people who are technically considered adults, if the idea is to protect the underage player in any way, shape, or form from potential hazing or other issues, I think this is totally fine. Provide them their own shower, their own dressing area. I think it's totally fine. If that's the goal, right? Because I will tell you this, like I was involved in musical ensembles in college, right? I was in marching band. Marching band has this like quasi-toxic culture with drum corps, right? And there have been a lot of issues with certain drum corps where you have early 20s people sharing locker rooms, dressing rooms, showers with underage people. And that obviously presents its own list of problems. And so to that end, I get it. If that's the idea, is to protect underage players and to give them privacy, I think this is totally fine. But my question, I guess, becomes, if it's 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds who are playing with players their same age, they should just be able to go and do like what all of us did in high school when you have gym class. You get dressed, you go do your thing, you take your shower, you get dressed, you go back to class. Like, I don't know why this has to be a big thing. But it's just weird. It's just strange.
It's
I
weird.
guess that's it.
It's weird. That's the point of it. And other podcasts and other hockey outlets have talked about it. It's big news in Canada. Believe me, it is. People are talking about it everywhere.
Yeah, and if people think that why are we talking about it? Look, it impacts the sport.
Yes,
it impacts who is going to play the sport.
Yep.
Like you might say, you know, I've had enough. I'm not letting my kids go play. That's ridiculous. I'm not making my kids go through that. They're not playing anymore. And you might just get that, and then it actually becomes less. It becomes like less inclusive. Like you're just like people are going to stay away. It's like I don't want to do it anymore. Nope.
Thank you, Anthony.
You're doing the exact opposite.
Yes.
Of what I believe their intention is.
Yeah, I mean, you could, I guess, make the case. Is this just
Thank you, Anthony? Just answered. He said exactly what I was trying to say. It makes it worse.
Yeah,
it does in a lot of ways because you're making it seems more exclusive, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. Because I always look at it as the teammates should all look after each other anyway.
Yeah,
you know, Let the guys in there.
Think about what, and let's just be really blunt about it. Let's imagine that there is a player that this has to be that this is geared toward.
Yeah.
Okay, whether it's a or whatever. So there's a player that this is geared toward, and now they have 20 teammates who are like, well, we can't take a shower now because of you, or we can't get changed in the locker room now because of you. Is that inclusive? Have we made it inclusive by doing this? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, because that's what really it's come down to. Okay.
What you're explaining is like in a sense, it then becomes like a targeted bullying campaign by the rest of the team.
That kid just wants to play. That kid just wants to be part of the team. That kid does not want to be identified as someone who is different than everybody else on his team or her team. Right? That's what that person wants. They want to be part of the community. They don't want to be singled out as the reason why everyone else can't do something.
Yeah.
That's why it's so ridiculous, and I don't understand why they want to go through with it. But, whatever.
There's a flip side to the argument, but I feel like we're just going to end up putting ourselves in a weird spot if we go.
No, I know what the flip side is. I know what the flip side is. But think about what's more damaging.
This then extends like this. We go like full slippery slope. Like they're. I don't have a good way to say it, so I'm just not going to. But the fact remains: if the idea is to make the sport inclusive, if they think that this is going to somehow open the door to say a female athlete who wants to try to play in the men's league. Although they're kids. So, okay, like if it's a girl who wants to play in the boys league and they think that this is the way to do it, that's fine. Although in fairness, I don't think that if that's the case, there shouldn't be a girl sharing the same dressing room as the boys. Of course they need to give her
privacy. So and they do give them privacy.
And so like if the idea is, hey, we're trying to be inclusive to like the girl athlete who wants to play in the boys league, by all means, like I think that's fine. But again, you wouldn't put her in with the rest of the team anyway. That's very weird and wrong. So, okay. And if the idea is that it's as the sociology professor said in the Yahoo story, if this is perhaps like a very conservative family or movement, say it's like a conservative Muslim family, or it's a conservative, I don't know, just say a conservative family, don't want their child around other people getting dressed or whatever, then again, if you're building in what you think is a protection so that person can feel comfortable and play the sport, that's fine. Telling the rest of the people you can't do this because the person has like an objection to it, I don't think is additive. I just don't see it.
It's not.
So it's just, and we'll see. We will see if Hockey Canada walks it back, because what tends to happen with things like this, where you're trying to create a rule for the 90 whatever percent in benefit of like the 1 or 2%, we typically see an organization put something out and then quietly they walk it back. We'll see what happens. Again, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. I don't have a kid who plays hockey in Canada. So for me, whatever.
And neither did the guy who made up the rule.
Yeah. I'm gonna just make one small comparison that has nothing to do with. No, this is easy. Okay. So every year in March at the college basketball tournament, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If BYU makes the tournament, they cannot play Thursday, Saturday because of the religious reasons, right? So they have to play the Friday, Sunday. Or is it the other way around? I forget, whatever it is.
It's Friday, Sunday. It doesn't matter.
But whatever. But so the accommodation is made for them by the NCAA. No problem. We'll make sure you play on the days that you can play and not play on the day that you don't play.
Yeah.
That's how you accommodate a situation. You don't sit there and say to the other 65 teams or 67 teams in the tournament, okay, well, this one team can't play on this day, so none of us play on this day.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thought process. You find a way to accommodate the person or people who need to be accommodated. Mm-hmm. You don't change everything for everyone else.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with accommodating requests. Doesn't matter if it's a religious request, if it's a human sexuality request, whatever it is.
If it's a potential,
you accommodate
can you say disability anymore? But like if there's somebody who needs a physical accommodation, like you make that work because that's the right thing to do.
You accommodate the request. You make it so that everyone can participate, but you don't make it that everyone else has to change what they have to do in order to make that those one or two people participate. That's the difference, right?
Anthony, you nailed it. You should say exactly what I was trying to get out. And you know what? Listen, there's a lot of great people involved in hockey too. Like, so a lot of great kids and great families and everything. And I just feel like there's a different kind of sanctity amongst the hockey players are renowned for their camaraderie and being togetherness. You know, that's what we pride ourselves on. I just thought it was just a strange agenda. And again, and the one thing I will say, everybody should feel safe. Everybody should feel like they're wanted, not bullied. So those are important things. But at the same time, there's a culture of the sport that I hope has not been breached. I just had never seen it. And so when I read that the other day, I was a little bit puzzled by it in the decision that just sounded odd. And then reading other comments, I think a lot of guys, former players, were in the same group I was. You know, in hockey, a 16-year-old very quickly becomes an adult in that setting, right? Like there's guys that have just developed along quicker and they're part of that locker room. It's just I just feel like it's an age thing. It's a little bit odd, but it's not something that it's ever impacted my life in hockey locker rooms. And but it never takes away from the fact that we want everybody to feel, you know, confident and in the rinks and having a lot of fun to go out and play hockey. That's really what it's all about. But I just thought this was very, very odd and how it came down and how nobody was asked about it at all. It was like, here's the rule, live with it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right.
Strange time.
That took up a lot more time than I expected it to, which is fine. I want to make sure that before we roll out of here, we let people know that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. I will also point out the fact that nobody decided to point out to me that I had the wrong banner on the bottom of the screen for a little bit. That was promoting a pro wrestling podcast and not Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. Am I going to go back in post-production and replace that? No, I'm not. So I will tell people right now, you can go follow It's Just Wrestling wherever you get your podcasts. And it's got this logo. I'm actually wearing it right now. But like, you can go subscribe to that. I'm going to bring it back next week. It's going to be very exciting. Guys, one last thing here, I think, before we head out. We are obviously excited about what is to come. We know that the Flyers are going to be back on the ice on Thursday. They are going to have a season that I think will probably impress some people. I think that if nothing else, I don't know about you guys, I feel a level of excitement for the Flyers season that I haven't felt in a few. And it's weird because the team's not great on paper. But I feel an excitement because we are going to see some of the kids play. Do you guys share that kind of just general optimism that it's going to at least be a team that's going to be fun to watch, is going to play hard, and that like we'll at least realistically get to learn what we have in some of these young guys?
Yeah. I mean, listen, there's a certain excitement. It's because I know what we're dealing with this year. There's an honesty to the organization and acceptance of where they're at. So that makes our job easier because we don't have to be the other side beating the drum saying, no, this is bullshit. No, there's a flow now to this. There's an understanding of what this team is trying to do, what they're trying to build. And that requires some patience. And we understand that. What I want to see this year is I want to see young guys take a step forward. I want to see their competitive levels get high. And I want to see their skill increase, you know, and if they can do that, and if not, then there'll be a trade deadline that Danny can move some players, keep building his vision, and then again next summer. But I'm looking for a team this year that's going to make the fans proud, the team proud again, and the way it competes. I thought there was a start to that last year. I thought there was a lot of good things last year that went on with competitiveness and effort. And that'll have to be prevalent again. You get a little bit more skill in now with Atkinson and Couturier. Those are huge question marks. There's a lot of things I'd like to see. Development of Farabee again. What's he look like this year? Cam York. How does Travis Sanheim deal with a difficult offseason that he had, you know, on a mental level? Just as he go out and play. Does Ristolainen, was that a facade last year? Did he have a good year because he was just playing because he was worried about torts? Is Carter Hart going to have a good year? How many shots against is this team going to give up on average this year? You know, how many guys up front? Is Noah Cates going to look like a future Selke Trophy winner? There's a lot of questions. Is it Foerster or Brink? There's a lot of really good unanswered questions that we're going to see develop over time. But until that time, there is still a lot of unanswered questions, and we're only going to have to wait, and only time's going to show us that. But I'm looking forward to a team that works hard this year and certainly makes the city proud with an effort on a nightly basis.
That's all good stuff. How about you, Amp?
Everything Bundy said.
Wow. What a cop-out. You fraud.
That'll shut it down.
I mean, seriously, he nailed everything. I don't think that there's one thing that I sit there and go, man, Bundy, how did he miss that? Like, he nailed every major question that this team has, in my mind, at least coming into the season. I mean, there might be some questions that crop up as the season comes along, right? But I mean, going into the season, he said everything just very nicely and succinctly there. I mean, it was perfect. Yeah. The one name that was not, by the way, brought up earlier today when we talked about the roster was Wade Allison. I believe is still on the roster, one of the 26. I believe he's going to be, I just thought I would mention, I believe he's going to be the extra forward. And you kind of get away with Wade Allison being the extra forward because it's not like he's 22, 23, he's 26, I think now or whatever, right? So he's a guy that, he'll get his opportunities to play, but I don't think that you're worried about, oh my God, we got to find time for Wade Allison at this point in his career.
One more thing before we go, Anthony. I know you're real busy with baseball right now. Give us your quick picks for Phillies Atlanta. I mean, I saw Atlanta. I went to the game like 3 or 4 weeks ago when Atlanta was in here. We had a picture together. If Atlanta's playing like that, I think they're going to be really hard to beat. But, man, the Phillies got their mojo right back again, too. So.
Bundy, and I said this on Crossed Up yesterday. So my original prediction was for the World Series was Braves-Orioles. I kind of went chalk on those two, but I think they've been the two best teams in baseball, and I didn't think that there was anybody who can beat them. But I've said all along that if there's one team that can beat the Braves, and I only think there's one in baseball, it's the Phillies. And I've kind of changed my mind. I thought it was a 5-game series no matter what. I thought it was the closest series to being 50-50 of any series that I've looked at as a potential matchup in the playoffs. And I originally went with Braves in 5. But I went on the podcast yesterday and I flipped it. And I said, I'm going to go with the Phillies. I'm going to go with the Phillies in 5. And I think it's more because Atlanta's got some starting pitching issues. They only have Strider right now. Max Fried is their other starter. He's supposed to come back, but he hasn't pitched in 3 weeks, and he's going to pitch for the first time in the playoffs. I mean,
good luck.
It's not easy, and he's probably not going to be able to throw. He's not going to be able to throw more than maybe 3-4 innings, and their bullpen is their weakness. And then their number 3 starter is Charlie Morton, and he can't pitch in that series. So they don't have their number 2 is down. Their number 3 is out completely. And then the guys on the back of the rotation are just guys. So I think it favors the Phillies, the matchup. And then getting days off in between. They play 3 off days in a 5-game series, which is very, very rare. That allows the Phillies to really match up pitchers as much as they want with the Braves. I think the Phillies get a slight edge now.
I saw somebody tweeted out a picture of Chris Christie, and it was the I don't know if you guys saw it, the debate where he said to Donald Trump, he was like, you're ducking questions, and if you keep evading things, we're going to start calling you Donald Duck. Yeah. And so somebody said that we're going to start calling you it was from Spencer Strider to like Spencer Walker. They're going to turn him into a walking guy. He's going to be awful. Now, I didn't say it's a good joke, but I do think it's going to be interesting to see. Like Strider is a absolutely frightening strikeout machine if he's on. But he can
gives up runs. He gives up home runs. He gives up runs.
He gives up runs. Is he the ace of the staff?
Well, Fried when healthy probably is.
But going into the series, is Strider
going into the series he is.
Is Strider their ace? Yes. Yeah. Does he give up home runs and runs? Yes. That sounds oddly familiar to the Philadelphia Phillies, except they obviously have recognized that Zach Wheeler is and always has been the ace of the staff. But I will say that it was nice to see Aaron Nola decide to turn back the clock a little bit and put together a nice start. If he's on, and I will say right now publicly, if Aaron Nola goes back to being his ace form and he takes this team deep into the playoffs and they win a World Series, I'll take back every awful thing I've said about him. Okay. And there have been many, very many things. Now, will I ever come to a point where I'm willing to take back all of the sad or mean things I've said about that fraud Mike Trout, no, I won't take those.
Okay,
back, but
I'll leave it.
So it's time to go.
I'll leave it with this last thing on baseball.
Hold on. Speaking of, now I want to get to hockey really quick. They're like this idea of hot takes and like ridiculous things. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there have been a lot of people going after Connor Bedard for his preseason, and people saying that he was overrated from the start and that he's never going to amount to things. Like I've seen that stuff starting to like come across Twitter. Is there anything more ridiculous than judging a young player who is like a teenager playing in an NHL preseason before he's taken any kind of like? Is there anything dumber than that?
I'll give you something that's more ridiculous. Posting videos of your first round draft pick in preseason in Russia and talking about how awesome he is. That's more ridiculous.
Why do you have to crap on people who like to get excited about Matvei Michkov? By the way, he's looked good. If we're going to take one more positive out of the show, we've got an hour and a half. I don't know why. Nobody's going to listen. Actually, they will, because we have the best listeners and viewers in the world. But Michkov has looked really good. And in fact, he helped lead Sochi to a win over SKA, who loaned him out to Sochi. And that had to feel good for him. So kudos to the young guy. He's looking good.
Yeah, my last baseball take is this. Mm-hmm. Whoever wins the Phillies Braves wins the World Series.
Ooh, I like it.
There you go.
All right, guys. I think it's probably a good place to end. Flyers season starts next Thursday, and as of right now, we are going to be going to record an interview on Monday. And then if all things go the way that they're supposed to, unless #lawyers, we should have, hopefully, a new episode and or announcement next Wednesday is our target. Everybody get excited. And believe me, if we don't have a new episode or an announcement on Wednesday, I will be screaming behind the scenes. And who will I be screaming at? Anthony SanFilippo, who you can find on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. I certainly will not be screaming at Bundy on Twitter at CTherien6. And if you decide that you want to scream at me, I'm on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. Thank you to everybody who listened to the show, wherever you get your podcasts, those of you who watched the show on YouTube. And I can't tell you enough how much it means to have people who go into Spotify and respond to the generic question of what did you think about this episode? We've had people doing that the last few weeks. Maybe we'll get to those as well. Leave a 5-star rating on Spotify. You go to the Snow the Goalie page, hit the star rating, leave 5 stars. If you're on Apple Podcasts, go over there, leave a 5-star rating, and please leave a 5-star review. We'll read it happily on the show here at the end of the episode. And if you're on YouTube, hit that like button. If you've sat through an hour and a half of this show, all right, and you're watching on YouTube, and you have a YouTube account where you can like things, hit that thumbs up button. It helps us out a lot, and we love and appreciate you very much. So, all right, for Ant, for Bundy, I'm Russ. Thanks for listening, maybe even watching Snow the Goalie, which still somehow remains the only Flyers podcast. Some would even argue the biggest Flyers podcast in the country, maybe even in the world. Who knows? Who's to say? We'll talk to you all again very soon.